Daddy D says you can't have your nose back, but you can take a seat with me, Chris Hansen.
Subscribe, please. This case takes place in the USA in the year 2007. When you're homeless, it's said that the world stops seeing you, and you become part of the background, invisible and forgotten. However, what happened to Aaron Taylor was literally impossible to ignore. Aaron Paul Taylor was born and raised in Bend, Oregon, and he grew up in a close-knit family with 4 siblings. In his youth, Aaron struggled in school and longed for acceptance from his peers. As a teenager, he began experimenting with alcohol and drugs, pushing boundaries in a bid to fit in with his friends. These early poor choices would later contribute to the hardships he faced. In his early 20s, Aaron survived a near-fatal motorcycle accident, and this left him badly injured. According to some sources, his personality began to somewhat change, something that can happen after extreme trauma or head injuries. He was so injured by this accident that his mother had to bathe him and he was required to wear diapers, but eventually he did get better. At some point in the 1990s, his family decided to move to Oregon, but Aaron refused to follow them, insisting on staying behind in Arizona, even if it meant living in homeless shelters. For a time, Aaron was pretty much estranged from his family. However, he did briefly reunite with his parents after his grandparents pleaded with him to come home, and with their encouragement, he enrolled to get his GED at Grand Canyon University. But on the day, his mother gave him bus fare to attend classes. However, Aaron never arrived. Aaron seemingly vanished, and that was the last time his mother, Pat, ever saw her son again. His parents searched desperately for him. They even hired a private investigator, but they couldn't find Aaron anywhere. Aaron was still alive, but he had chosen a different life for himself. Aaron began living on the streets. The reason as to why he left his home behind and chose to live a life of homelessness isn't exactly clear. Some online have speculated that Aaron might have gone through some horrific trauma when he was younger, something that he may never have disclosed to others, and because of this, he fled without looking back. After leaving his family behind, Aaron drifted through Phoenix. At one point, he committed crime. He was convicted in the late 1990s of a burglary charge and spent about 7 years in prison. I couldn't find the exact details of the crime, but with a 7-year sentence, it must have been relatively bad. However, by 2007, the 36-year-old Aaron had been released and was living near Paradise Valley Mall. For what it's worth, Aaron appeared to have stopped committing crime. Those who knew him in Phoenix described him as a kind-hearted soul. One worker at the mall said, "He was just a nice guy who hung around. He never bothered anyone." Many others described Aaron as a friendly and endearing transient who had made a home for himself on the streets just near the mall. Many recalled Aaron dressed in his familiar blue hoodie and baseball cap. It's said that he would sometimes sit and talk with employees on their breaks and make in conversation that many workers said would help pass the time. One maintenance worker also said that he would tidy up outside the shops, removing discarded wrappers or bottles, trying to keep the area clean. In short, Aaron was a gentle, well-liked man struggling with addiction and homelessness, but despite this, was trying to be a positive presence in the community, although Aaron's presence in the mall would attract the attention of some truly despicable monsters. A group of local young men had spotted Aaron. They saw a vulnerable man, and they decided to make his life a living hell. For some reason, they began to target him. Multiple witnesses later reported that 3 young males, who, in a sick form of entertainment, began to harass and torture Aaron. The 3 were described as white males, roughly aged between 16 and 19 at the time, and were often seen loitering around the mall and strip centre, causing issues for locals and workers. For them, Aaron was an easy victim, someone they could bully for fun without any real consequence. And what Aaron had to endure in those months before his death was nothing short of horrific. Mall employees later said that the group even restrained Aaron using tape, binding him to a bench in full public view, a twisted form of humiliation. And this happened to Aaron on multiple occasions. Other times, the group would pour liquids on him and push him around. One security guard had witnessed these attackers dousing Aaron with unidentified liquids and even physically throwing him into a water fountain. The three bullies also knew that Aaron struggled with addiction, and so they would frequently supply him with alcohol in a bid to get him extremely drunk, only then to take advantage of him in his intoxicated state to humiliate and attack him further. Many passers-by did see Aaron taped down on a bench, unable to move, whilst his tormentors laughed. Many either didn't care about Aaron due to him being homeless, or they feared that the boys would attack them instead. Pretty much everyone was unwilling to help. Aaron saw people watch what was happening to him, but they just walked on. This pattern of torment went on for months, leading up to Christmas of 2007. According to those who witnessed the attacks, Aaron never fought back, nor did he call the police. He would just pick himself up and carry on with his day. Those who worked at the mall said that Aaron never lost his polite manner despite the attacks he suffered. He always appeared to be friendly and cheery. But tragically, what began as non-lethal bullying grew increasingly more violent. By late December, the tormentor's behaviour had set the stage for a truly horrific crime. And now we arrive to the day of the final attack, the 25th of December 2007, Christmas Day. As many families gathered around fires inside their homes, eating large amounts of food, Aaron spent that evening in his usual spot near the mall. Aaron had been drinking, and he eventually dozed off and fell asleep on the concrete bench just outside the mall. This was a place that he felt relatively safe in. Unfortunately, his tormentors and soon-to-be killers were lurking. Witnesses later told the police that the same three young men who had tormented Aaron for months showed up that night, and they approached him on the bench. At around 6:50 p.m, the trio were seen standing around Aaron, who appeared to be asleep or passed out from alcohol. Aaron then woke up. One witness later said they saw them sharing drinks with Aaron. It appeared to be friendly, but this was a tactic that they would usually employ in a bid to create a false sense of security. But then, one passerby overheard a disturbing statement coming from one of the boys, something that hinted at what was to come. They said, "Jesus has to die. It's Christmas." Now, Aaron had a beard and long hair, and in some ways he resembled the interpretation of Jesus. Shortly after 7 p.m, the boys decided to do something so sinister that it still haunts the area to this day. As Aaron fell back asleep from alcohol, the trio began flicking lit matches at Aaron's beard. Then suddenly, Aaron's beard caught fire. This then spread to his clothing, likely accelerated by the alcohol that had saturated his clothing. It's believed that the boys had poured alcohol over him just moments before. Within seconds, flames erupted all over Aaron's body. As this happened, the three cowards ran. Just moments later, the Phoenix Fire Department received a frantic 911 call reporting that a man was on fire near the mall. The caller said that at first they thought it was a mannequin, but as they got closer, they realized that this was a human being. For the next 4 minutes, bystanders desperately attempted to save Aaron. A mall security guard rushed over, as did a shop assistant from the Circle K convenience store across the road. They bravely tore off their jackets and tried to smother the flames that were consuming Aaron's body. They patted and beat the fire with clothing, but it was no use. The fire was too intense and feeding on Aaron's clothing. Eventually, the heat drove them back, and their jackets simply weren't enough to put the fire out. Before too long, the flames had created a plume of black smoke visible to horrified onlookers. Phoenix firefighters arrived quickly to the scene. They found Aaron still on the bench, standing upright as he burned. Acting fast, the fire crew doused the flames. As soon as the fire was out, first responders pulled Aaron's burned body off the bench and laid him on the ground to perform CPR. His clothing was destroyed, and his body charred black. Despite the efforts of the firefighters and the paramedics, Aaron had suffered catastrophic burns. They rushed him to hospital, but there was nothing they could do. Aaron was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital on Christmas Day. What's unbelievably disturbing is that Aaron had been alive and breathing. He was conscious enough to inhale smoke and flames into his lungs. He literally burned to death, experiencing one of the most agonizing deaths imaginable. After Aaron was rushed into the hospital, an investigation began to find out exactly what had happened. Scattered around the scene were eerie remnants of what had occurred: a whiskey bottle, snack wrappers, and pieces of burnt clothing. Investigators collected these items as evidence, hoping that they might hold clues like fingerprints or DNA just in case this had been some kind of foul play. But the intense firefighting efforts had compromised much of the forensic evidence. There was also one giant issue that needed to be solved as soon as possible. Aaron's body was so badly burned that any immediate identification was impossible, and they found no identification on him. It took investigators 3 days to determine that the man they found on the bench was Aaron Taylor. They eventually identified him after a local acquaintance came forward and provided Aaron's name, noting that he knew Aaron's family and could help contact them. Aaron's parents were then notified that their son had been killed in such a horrific way. Initially, there was some confusion about what exactly happened to Aaron. Early on, authorities considered the possibility that this was just a terrible accident, but soon witnesses came forward with some very vital information. The next day, Phoenix police classified the death as suspicious. It became clear to them that this was no accident at all, but an act of deliberate murder. But tragically, any traces of the killers had been destroyed by the fire, and the water and foam sprayed by firefighters while necessary to douse the blaze had the side effect of washing away any blood, DNA, and other physical evidence. One of the first big breaks came when several eyewitnesses independently described seeing the trio of young men with Aaron shortly before he caught fire. These witnesses included mall security personnel, along with other local residents who happened to be walking by. All of them knew of the mysterious trio's dangerous reputation. The witnesses consistently told a similar story. Aaron had been socializing with 3 white young males that evening, and they confirmed that they were the same individuals known for previously harassing and tormenting him. But most crucially, at least 2 witnesses saw the moment the attack happened. They reported that Aaron was asleep or passed out on the bench when the trio began flicking lit matches at him. Investigators then learned about the history of abuse that Aaron had suffered from these same suspects. This was not a random, spontaneous crime. It was a pattern of escalating torture. Within just days, Phoenix police had identified the 3 suspects that they believed to be responsible. According to reports, the officers were able to track them down so easily because they were already locally notorious with law enforcement. They turned out to be 2 brothers, aged 17 and 20, who lived with their mother in an apartment complex near the mall, along with a 24-year-old friend of theirs. When detectives brought the boys in for questioning, they denied everything. They claimed to have no knowledge of what had even happened. Preposterous when investigators knew that they all lived so close. It would be almost impossible for all 3 of them to not have heard at least some rumours. As the police interviews went on, they told the boys that witnesses had placed them at the scene of the crime, but none of them gave any useful information. Before too long, the brother of the 2 mothers quickly hired an attorney, as did the other person's family. Once lawyers were involved, the 3 suspects refused to answer any further questions. When detectives looked at the security footage from nearby stores and the mall, they discovered that not a single camera had captured the specific courtyard area where the crime occurred. It was a dark, tucked-away corner just out of view of the cameras. The police had nothing. No confession, no surveillance video, no forensic evidence. Detectives had a very strong idea as to what happened, but they had nothing concrete. All the case had was witness testimony, but it soon transpired that even some key witnesses were hesitant to get deeply involved. Some of the witnesses were local teenagers. They feared retaliation from the 3 other boys. They didn't want to be dragged into a serious criminal case by testifying against their peers. They were worried that the 3 boys might be found not guilty, and then they would be subjected to a similar torment. News of the Christmas murder sent shockwaves through the community. Those who had interacted with Aaron were heartbroken and outraged that something like this could happen in public. Now, here's another part of the case that is truly horrific. There was a maintenance worker who worked at the mall who had been Aaron's friend. The two would often chat if they bumped into each other, and were relatively close. This maintenance worker was told the news that his friend had been killed. But if that wasn't bad enough, he was tasked with the disturbing duty of cleaning up the crime scene the next morning, washing the blood and ash off the benches where Aaron had been killed. This experience was so traumatic for this worker that he quit his job immediately afterward, unable to bear returning to the place marked by his friend's violent death. Other mall employees who knew Aaron expressed guilt and regret in the wake of the murder. They began to wonder, what if they had intervened earlier when they saw him being bullied in the months prior? What if they could have stopped what happened to him? But no one could have known just how far these boys would have taken it. Aaron's family were given the news. His parents stated that they had always held out hope that their son would one day return home. According to one source, Aaron hadn't seen his family for over 16 years. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. The police hoped that one of the boys would crack. Perhaps the guilt would consume them, but this didn't happen. As much as they tried, they just failed to gather enough evidence to put these boys behind bars. Proving who killed Aaron grew increasingly more difficult by the day. Frustration only grew. Days turned into months, and then months into years. Not a single person was held responsible for what happened to Aaron. 8 years after the murder in 2015, the police obtained DNA samples from at least one suspect to see if advanced forensic tests could find a match to anything from the crime scene. However, no usable human DNA evidence was recovered. Police began questioning more citizens of the city in the years after the murder. It turned out that some people had heard some things that have enraged law enforcement and members of the public alike. One witness heard the alleged killers brag afterward about setting a homeless man on fire, and that they had managed to get away with it. Now, this is all just hearsay, nothing concrete, but if true, it gives an insight into these people and how little they thought of Aaron's death. As hard as the investigators tried, there just wasn't enough to make any charges stick, and so no one was ever arrested or named for the murder of Aaron. The murder of Aaron Taylor highlighted a disturbing trend of violence against the homeless in the United States of America. The National Coalition for the Homeless documented at least 122 attacks on homeless people in 2006 alone, 20 of which were fatal. Aaron's case was just one of a string of horrific attacks targeting the homeless during the 2007 holiday season. Authorities have since worked with programs like Silent Witness to offer a reward for any information leading to the capture or arrest of Aaron's killers. But to this day, the reward remains unclaimed. In the years since 2007, the Phoenix Police Department has not yet closed the case of Aaron Taylor. It remains an open, unsolved homicide case, and detectives periodically revisit it, hoping to find any new leads that might bring the killers to justice. As of right now, the 3 suspects haven't been formally named, never mind arrested or charged with anything, and tragically, that's the way it will likely stay.